begin the Gemara today on the top of Daf Samach Tes Amud Aleph, about 6 or 7 lines in from the Amud, where it says Ve'eme misheyesh le'almanas. We stopped right in the middle of Inyan. The Gemara brought a pasuk Uvas kayin kisiya almano grusha v'zera ein la. So Bas Kayin that gets married to a Yisrael, she had no children with him. So what happens? V'shavel be'saviyah kanara milechem aviyah teichel. She returns back to her father's house and she can eat truma. So the Gemara brought the drasha from Rabbi Shmuel that from here you learn that if a Bas Kayin gets married to a Ovid Kechavim or an Eved, she can never go back to eat truma. Why? Because getting married to a guy is not a marriage, and it's not shaykh for it to be referred to as an almana or to be a grusha. The kedusha cannot ever take effect, and therefore she can't go back to her father's house. That was the drasha. So the drasha here is a chumrah. Getting married to a guy where there's no concept of almana or gerishin, so there's also no vishaval besaviyah to go and eat the truma. So the Gemara asks in this drasha, maybe we should learn from this pasuk that the exclusion is not l'chumra, but maybe it's l'kula. Let's see inside. Zok the Gemara, why wouldn't we say mishi yesh le'almanas v'gerishim ba? That if it's a case where this woman, this Bas Kayin, got married to someone and the marriage can take effect, so she can be an almana or grusha, so then the halacha would be, like the pasuk says, kiles la zera. If she had no children from this Yisrael, ka'achla, she goes back to her father's house and eats truma. Ki isla zera. If she had children from this Yisrael, lo yachla, then she's not going back to her father's house as is. So, because it's again, the pasuk only says v'zera ein la, so then she will not be able to eat truma, so lo yachla. Now the drasha would be as follows, l'kula. That if this Bas Kayin got married to someone, to a guy or to a Eved, where it's not possible to say that she would become an almana or a grusha, so then Alfagav de Islo Zera, maybe here the pasuk is saying that we don't make this distinction if she has children or not, and even if she does have children from him, so Nami Teichel, she could still go back to her father's house and eat truma. So maybe the whole exclusion here regarding if she marries a guy or an Eved is l'kula, to say that she always goes back to eat truma. Says the Gemara, we can't say this because in Cain, if so before in the Gemara, what did the Gemara say? That it says in the pasuk ubas, and the word ubas is extra to teach me that this halacha is true not only the Bas Kayin, but also regarding a Leviah and Yisraelis, the same halacha applies to her as well. So the Gemara asks on this, now im kain, if you're going to say that this pasuk and this drasha is teaching me a leniency to say that if she marries a Ovid Kechavim or an Evet, she can always go back to her father to eat trumeh, so riboy leviah v'Yisraelis lamali. Why would I need a special extra word ubas to come and include and say that this applies also to Leviah and Yisraelis as well? If this is a leniency that we're learning from here, if the leniency applies to a Bas Kayin that's on a higher level, that has more kedusha, definitely the leniency would apply to a Leviah and Yisraelis. I don't need a special drasha to teach that to me. So therefore it must be like we learned before, that this pasuk is coming to teach me a chumrah, that if she gets married to a Ovid Kechavim or a Eved, she can never go back to eat trumeh, and for this chumrah I need a special pasuk of uvas to say that chumrah applies also for a Leviah and Yisraelis. Now the Gemara goes back to what we learned before, that only if she's a Bas Kayin is getting married, or Leviah of Yisraelis for that matter, is getting married to someone that's puzzled to her, but the Kedushin takes effect, because it's only a chiyuv lav. Then she becomes puzzled to go back to eat trumah. But for chayve krisis, it would not puzzle her. So the Gemara asks on this, Rabbi Akiva, if you remember, we learned earlier in the Masechta, he holds that even getting married to a puzzle which is only a lav, also the Kedushin never takes effect. So Rabbi Akiva has a different way of interpreting this pasuk here. Well, Rabbi Akiva that said, Ein Kedushin toivsim b'chayve lavin. That even if the puzzle is only for a chiv lav, but still the Kedushin will not take effect. So if so, umay kisiyeh. So when it says in the pasuk kisiyeh leish zar, going back to the pasuk which the Gemara brought to teach us that if a Bas Kayin gets married to someone that's puzzled, that she can't go back to eat trumeh. Bas Kayin kisiyeh leish zar. So in that pasuk, what does the word kisiyeh mean? It doesn't mean if she got married because the kedushin does not take effect. So it means kitibol, when she has a relation with someone that's puzzled to her, that will puzzle her. So if so, it's not because the kedushin took effect. It's just because of the relation to someone that's puzzled. So almana grusha lamali, this pasuk we just brought before regarding almana grusha, that comes to teach me that even though the kedushin does not take effect, but still she would be pasal to eat truma. According to Rabbi Akiva, you don't need a special pasuk for that. According to Rabbi Akiva, the almana and grusha is a pasal person that, again, the Oivik that is, and a guy is a pasal person that she has a relation with, and that should pasal her from eating truma. According to Rabbi Akiva, the whole psul that she gets pasul from eating truma is because of having a relation with someone that's pasul to her, not because the kedushin took effect. So the same applies if she has a relation with a guy or an eved. There's no reason to make a distinction, and there's no reason that you would need a special drasha of almana or grusha, which the Gemara brought before. So the Gemara answers that lahachmer aleha. When the pasuk writes that this paskayin that becomes an almana or grusha, and she has no children, so she can go back to eat truma, this is actually coming to teach us. So again, almana lahachmer aleha. It's coming to teach us regarding an almana, a chumra, that if she did have children from the Yisrael, then she can't go eat truma. Or grusha, and the pasuk mentions also if she would be a grusha and she's going back to her father's house, over here has to tell me the leniency that if she had no children from this Yisrael, then she could go back to eat truma. In other words, what the Gemara is saying over here is, according to Rabbi Akiva, this pasuk is not extra to make any drasha, like it said before, to learn from here regarding a guy or eved, that she can't go back to eat truma. We need the pasuk for what the pasuk itself is coming to teach me regarding the halacha of a baskayin that gets married to a Yisrael, that if she doesn't have children, she can go back to eat truma. If she did have children with this Yisrael, she can't go to eat truma. And there's a unique chiddush regarding an almana to say that there's a chumrah if she had children with this Yisrael that she can't eat truma. And there's a unique chiddush regarding grusha for the kula to say that if she did not have children, she still could eat truma. And the Gemara explains why these are two chiddushim here. But tzricha, and it's needed for the pasuk to teach me this as follows. Hiyashmin an almana, if it would say regarding an almana that her husband, the Yisrael, died and she goes back to her father's house, I would say almana, only by an almana, the chiles la zera achla. So over here I say that if she had no children with him, she could eat truma mishum dechazia lekohona, because an almana is still someone that could get married to a kohen, only can't get married to a kohen gadol, but she can get married to a kohen, so therefore she goes back to her father's house and she can eat truma. Aval grusha lechazia lekohona. But a grusha, she was divorced from her husband, the Yisrael. So now she can't get married to any kohen. So maybe I would say, afagav de lesla zera, even if she didn't have any children with this Yisrael, lo yachla, because she's possible to get married to a kohen, maybe she shouldn't be able to eat truma either. And the reverse, v'yashmin and grusha, if it would only tell me the halacha of a grusha, I would say, grusha hudichi isla zera lo yachla. If she was divorced from her husband, the Yisrael, then I say that if she had children with him, so then she can't go back to eat truma. Because it's connected to the fact that she now became possible to eat. She became possible to get married to a kohen. So too she becomes possible to eat the truma. But an almana that could get married to a kohen, maybe I should say that afagav the isla zera, that even if she had children with her husband the Yisrael, nami techel, maybe she can go back to her father's house and still continue eating truma. So that's why we need the pasuk to say that by almana wa machmer, if she had children with the Yisrael, she can't eat truma, and by the grusha we're being mekel, that even if she did not have children with him, she can go back to eat truma. Frag the Gemara, ve'eme nivala lepasala. So now that we're saying that we have this halacha, that a bas kohen that had a relation with someone that's pasul to her, so then she can't ever eat truma again. So maybe I should say that includes another psul which was not mentioned in the Braisa quoted before. So maybe I should say that it's af machze grushase. Even a person that returns a wife that he divorced that got married to someone else, and that's a isra, he's not allowed to be with her. Maybe that should pasul her as well from eating truma. Says the Gemara, le'ish zar amar achmana. The pasuk says kisiya le'ish zar. Ish zar means someone that's foreign to her. Mishazar etzla meikara. This is someone that was pasul to her from always. Not this woman that was kosher to be married to him, but only now as a result of the fact that he divorced her and she got married to someone else, now she became pasul. This woman was not a zar for her in the beginning. Or the Bach takes out the word meikare, the lav zarhu. But if so, a chalal if a woman gets married to a cholol, and this cholol is not a zar for her. A bas kohen is allowed to marry a cholol. A Leviah, Yisraelis for sure is allowed to marry a kohen, which is a cholol. So loy lifsel. He should not passel her from eating truma. And the halacha is that he does. If you marry a cholol, it passels this woman of eating truma. Why is this? And says the Gemara, here there's a pasuk for this. On Makra, the pasuk says, Lo yechalel zaroi ba'amov. That he should not marry a woman that's passel for him, that the kohen should not marry a woman that's passel to him, and he will be mechalel zaroi, he will be mechalel his children. So it says zaroi, his children. So therefore makish zaroi loy. I compare the children to the father himself. Mahu paisel, just like the father pasels if he marries an almana or a grusha, a chalutza, when he's not supposed to. So he pasels her because she's passel to marry him. Avzaroi nami paisel. So too the zera, the child born, which is a cholol, anyone getting married to that cholol will also passel her from going back to eat truma. Going back to the pasuk before, so what did it say? Kisiya le'ishzar. That was the source that if she marries someone that's passel to her, that she can't go back to eat truma. Now, if so, let's say mishas havoya, that if it says siya, so maybe that's just from the edison. When there was an edison, a kedushin, from that point she becomes passel, and not when she had relations with this person that's passel to her. Says the Gemara, now dumye the kohen gadol ba'almana. We compare this to the kohen gadol and almana, which it says there in the pasuk. Ma kohen gadol ba'almana bibiyah, just like by a kohen gadol and almana. So the iser and what pastels are only if he has relations with her. Here as well, this that a woman that marries someone that's passel to her becomes passel, it's only if there was relations, not just with the havaya, with the kedushin. Maybe it would be necessary to have both the kedushin and bia, since it says in the pasuk siya, so maybe it would be necessary to have both in order to passel her from going back to eating truma. So again the Gemara says, no, dumya the kohen gadol, we compare to what it says by kohen gadol, ma kohen gadol ba'almana b'bia luchuda, just like by almana, by a kohen gadol, with an almana, so the bia itself passels her. So too, and Rashi here brings the pasuk because it says le'yachalol zaroi. Le'yachalol zaroi means only the bia that brings the zera. Afhainami bibia luchuda. So too over here, it's the bia to these people that are passel to her, and that alone is what passels her from going back to being able to eat truma. Now, the Gemara goes back to the Braisa that was quoted before regarding this subject of a woman marrying someone that's passel to her, that she becomes passel to eat truma or to marry a kohen. And over there were another two opinions brought in the Braisa, Rabbi Yosi and Rab Shimon ben Gamliel, and the Gemara will explain this here now. So it said in the Braisa, Rabbi Yosi said, Kol shezare passel. If the woman marries someone that's passel and the children become passel, then paisel. So then he passels her, the husband passels her as well of going to eat truma. But if it's a person that the children will not be passel, ain't a paisel. So he does not passel her. So the Gemara wants to understand, so what exactly is the case? Which pasel would be the difference between the Tanakama that gave a list of psulim that if she marries them, she would become pasel, and this rule that Rabbi Yosi is saying here? So which rule it will apply according to Rabbi Yosi that's different than the Tanakama? Rabbi Yochanan says the difference would be Mitzri Sheni va'adomi Sheni ikke benayu. A second generation of a Mitzri or a second generation of an Adami. So we had before in the Gemara a few times by a Mitzri or an Adami, the pasuk says, Dor Shlishi Yavalem B'Kal Hashem. Only the third generation could marry into Klal Yisrael. Which means that if you're marrying a Mitzri Sheni, the second generation of a Mitzri or the second generation of an Adami, your children will be kosher to come into Klal Yisrael. But not this person himself is actually passel for you. So therefore, according to the Tanakama, this woman married someone that's passel, it passels her from Truma or from Kohona. But according to Rabbi Yosi, because the children born are third generation and they are kosher, so being married to this Mitzri Sheni as well will not passel her from Kohona. That's the difference between the Tanakama and Rabbi Yosi. So the Gemara Vishneim Leilam Duelam Kohen Gadol Balmana. Both of them are learning it out, comparing to the halacha by a Kohen Gadol that marries an almana. Tanakama Sova, the Tanakama says, Ma Kohen Gadol Balmana, just like in the case of a Kohen Gadol that marries an almana, should be Yosei Ba'aveda, that this is a bia, this is a relation that's an aveda, upaisel, and that passels her from Kohona and from Truma. Afhai nami paisel. So too over here, marrying a Mitzri Sheni or a Daimi Sheni, even though the child born is kosher, but this marriage is an aveda, so it passels her. Rabbi Yosi Sova, Rabbi Yosi says we compare it to Kohen Gadol but differently. So he holds Kohen Gadol, we compare to a Kohen Gadol. Ma Kohen Gadol shezarei pasol. In the case of an almana that marries a Kohen Gadol, the child born will be a chalal, will be pasol, upaisel. And over here I say that she becomes pasol from eating truma. Afkol shezarei pasol paisel. Only if in this marriage or in this relation it pasels her, or the children that is, become pasol, so too it will pasel her. So therefore this excludes the case of a woman that had a relation with a mitzri which is a second generation mitzri. The ein zarei pasel. So the children are not going to be pasel. The third generation could enter into Klal Yisrael. So therefore it doesn't pasel the mother either. Then the Braisa mentioned the third opinion. Rab Shimon Gamliel says the rule here is kol shatanoise bitoi. If this is a case that this woman had a relation with a man, that the daughter born from this marriage you would be allowed to marry, that the daughter is kosher, atanoise almanosai. So then you're going to be allowed to marry the almana of this relation. In other words, this almana that had this forbidden relation, someone that's possible to her, will be allowed to marry a kohen. Why? Because the daughter that's born is also kosher. So this sounds to be very similar to what Rabbi Yossi says, that we look at whether the zera is kosher to determine whether the woman herself that had this forbidden relation would be kosher. So Rabbi Shimon Gamliel is also saying, look at the daughter. If this daughter could marry a kohen, so then the mother can as well. So what is the difference between Rabbi Yossi's opinion and Rabbi Shimon Gamliel's opinion? So Allah says, Ger amayni umayavi ikebenayu. A ger that comes from Amen or Moav would be the difference between them. Why? Because as Rashi here brings, Amen and Moav are not allowed to marry into Klal Yisrael forever, but that's only Amen and Moav a Zachar. But the Gemara learns out that that's only Amayni v'loy Amaynis, but if it's a daughter from this Amayni, then a girl Amaynis could marry into Klal Yisrael. So therefore, according to Rab Shimon Gamliel, since the Bas, which is an Amaynis, Nekeva, could marry into Klal Yisrael, so the woman that had a relation with this Amayni would still be kosher to marry a kohen. But according to Rabbi Yossi, because the child in Amayni, if it's a zacha that's born, he would be pasel, so therefore the mother that had this relation with the Amayni would also be pasel. That's the difference between the Rab Shimon Gamliel and Rabbi Yossi. And again the Gemara says, Shneim lo ylamdua ela mikohen gadol. And they're both learning by comparing from the case of a kohen gadol balmana that's getting married to an almana. Rabbi Yossi says, Ma kohen gadol balmana shezarei pasel. Just like in the case of the kohen gadol that gets married to an almana. So this makes the children pasel. Upaisel, and that pasels her as well. Av kol shezarei pasel paisel. So too, any time she gets married to someone where the children will be pasel, even the zachar will be pasel, so therefore the mother also will be pasel to a kohen. Rab Shimon Gamliel says, no, the comparison to kohen gadol is a bit different. Ma kohen gadol b'almana shekol zarei pasel. Any child born from this marriage to this between the almana and the kohen gadol, the children will be pasel, whether it's a son or a daughter. Upaisel, and over there the mother as well becomes pasel. Av shekol zarei pasel. Also, too, only in a case where any child born, including a daughter that's born, would be pasel. Upaisel, that would pasel also the mother of not being able to marry into a kohen or to eat truma. So lafuki amayni amayvi. Therefore, according to Rab Shimon Gamliel, this excludes the case of a woman that had a relation with an amen amayev. Why? The ein kol zarei pasel, because not any child that's born from this relation would be pasel. Because the master has said that amayni v'loy amaynis and mayevi v'loy mayevis. That when the Torah says you're not allowed to marry an amayni, it's not if it's an amaynis or a mayevis, and therefore the bas will be kosher, so the mother is also kosher to be able to get married to a kohen. Zok Mishnah, continuing these halachas regarding a woman that would be possible of eating truma or enable her to eat truma. Again, we're talking about a bas Yisrael that marries a kohen to enable her to eat truma, or a bas kohen that marries a Yisrael that would be possible to eat a truma. So the Gemara brings other scenarios regarding this halacha. Ha'aynes v'hamefata. If someone had a relation with a woman against her will or seduced her, but this is without any marriage, of course, or v'hashaita, or a woman that gets married to a shaita, that's someone that has no deranged person that has no das at all. Loi paislin. So in these kinds of relationships, it will not passel a bas kohen of eating truma, and v'loi machilin. But it also will not be a cause for a bas Yisrael that had a relation with a kohen in any of these ways that she should not be able to eat truma. V'im ein anruyin love b'Yisrael. And if they are not roy, if these people she had a relation with are not fit to come into Klal Yisrael, this is going back to the halacha that we were learning about before, they will puzzle for her to have relation with them, harei lupaislan. And she had a relation with them, so they will puzzle her from eating truma, or from getting married to HaKayin. She becomes desecrated by this relation with someone that's puzzled to her. Keitzat, so how does this halacha apply? So Harei, the Bach here says, the Gear says, Harei Yisrael Shabbat al Bas Kayin. So going back to the first case of the Mishnah. So if the Yisrael has a relation with this Bas Kayin, and again, it's either a Oinus or a Mafata, so then, Teichal Betruma. She could still eat Truma, even though a Bas Kayin that marries a Yisrael, she cannot eat Truma while she's married to him, but this was not a marriage, it's only an Oinus, a Mafata against the will or with the will, but it's not a marriage, she can still eat Truma. However, the Mishnah continues, Ibra, but if she becomes pregnant from this relation, then loy teichal betruma. She can't eat truma. The Gemara will later bring a pasuk for this. Or actually, the Rashi here brings, we already had before, the Gemara says, a ubar pasels. Once she has an ubar already, so then she's not going back kenurea beisavia. She would not be going back to her father's house if her husband dies, as she was before, so she can't eat truma if she becomes pregnant. Nechtach ubar b'meyah. If the fetus is cut in her womb, even if she did not miscarry yet, so then teichal, she immediately could eat truma. The Mishnah continues, again the Bach over here is Gairis Harei, and what's if it's a case that Kayin Shabal Bas Yisrael? That here the one that had a relation with her is a Kayin that's having a relation with a Bas Yisrael. So loy teichal b'truma. She can't eat truma because of this relation. Because it was only a Einus and Mefata, it's not marriage, so she can't eat truma. Ibra, if she became pregnant from this relation, still a teichal. She still can't eat truma because just a ubar is not enough of a cause to be able to eat truma because of this child that's still a fetus. That's a kaim, but is still not born. She cannot eat truma because of this. Yalda, if she gave birth to this child to a kain, so then teichal. Now, because of her child, which is a kain, she can eat truma. So now nimtza, this is a case where it comes out koichai shel ben gadol mishalav. The power of the son to enable her to eat truma is even stronger than the father. The relation to the father did not enable her to eat truma because it wasn't a marriage, but the child born enables her to eat truma. Zok the Mishnah, another halacha, an interesting kind of a case here. Ha'eved paisel mishum biyeh. If there's a child, or really a grandchild, as we'll see, that is only a eved kanani, so he will pasel because of this relation that she had here. Ve'ene paisel mishum zera, but will not passel her because of a descendant that she has to passel her from eating truma. So the Gemara explains exactly what this means, how the case plays out. So the Mishnah explains, Keitzad. So what's the case here? Bas Yisrael lekayin. So whether it was a Bas Yisrael that's getting married to a kayin, which usually enables her to eat truma. Bas kayin li Yisrael. A Bas kayin that gets married to a Yisrael, now she can't eat truma. Now v'yolda imenu ben. She had a son, v'halacha ben, and this son went v'nichbash ala shifcha, and he had a relation with a shifcha kananis. V'yolda imenu ben, and this shifcha kananis gave birth to a son. So hareze eved. So the son that's born is a yichus after the mother, and therefore he's going to be an eved kanani. So now the son that's here, that's in the world, is an eved kanani. So now what happened? The father that was either a Kayin, the grandfather actually from this Eved, that was either a Kayin or was Yisrael, is passed away. So over here the question is this Eved enough of a reason to passel from eating Truma and so on? Let's see. So the Gemara, the Mishnah that is, Hoisa Eim Aviv Bas Yisrael. So if the mother of the father was a Bas Yisrael, a Kayin, in that case we just said that she was a Bas Yisrael that got married to a Kayin, so now she would want to eat Truma because of this descendant, the Evet Kanani, that's the only descendant that's alive from that marriage to the Kayin. Lai Teichel B'Truma. She cannot eat Truma if she has a descendant, an Evet Kanani, from this marriage, because that's not Nusyachas to her. It's not a descendant that will enable her to eat Truma. And in the reverse, Bas Kayin li Yisrael, if she was a Bas Kayin that got married to Yisrael, and the descendant that's here is an Evet Kanani, So usually after the Yisrael that passes away, she goes back to her father's house, unless there's a descendant of this marriage that's alive. So over here the descendant is an Evet Kanani. So Teichal b'Truma, she can go back to her father's house and eat Truma. That Evet Kanani is not related to her at all, so she just goes back to her father's house to eat Truma. Another halacha the Mishnah says, Mamzer Paisel Umachel. A mamzer will passel from eating Truma and will also cause that she will be able to eat Truma. And depends on the case here. So the Mishnah plays out the case. Keitzad, so how is this? Bas Yisrael a Kohen. So one case is a Bas Yisrael that gets married to a Kohen. Or the other case is Ubas Kohen li Yisrael, a Bas Kohen that gets married to a Yisrael. V'yolda menu bas. And she gave birth to a daughter. Holcha bas, and now this daughter went, v'nisis le'eved. Got married to an Eved, or lo'eved kechavim, or to a guy. V'yolda menu ben. And she gave birth to a son. What's the halacha of this son born? Harezeh mamzer. This son is a mamzer. And the Gemara will explain according to whose opinion he's a mamzer. But the Mishnah says this son is a mamzer. So now, if this mamzer is the only descendant from this marriage that's here, that's in the world, after the husband, whether the Kayin or the Yisrael, passed away, so now haise aim imai bas Yisrael a Kayin. If the grandmother was a bas Yisrael that married a Kayin, teichal b'truma. So now, because she has a descendant that's still alive, even though this descendant is a mamzer, because of this, she can eat truma. That's the halacha. Even after her husband, the Kayin, dies, if she still has a descendant from this marriage that's alive, she can eat truma, even if that descendant is not a Kayin at all, and even a mamzer. Bas Kayin li Yisrael. If she was a Bas Kayin that got married to Yisrael, and now she has this descendant that's alive, which is a mamzer, le'teichal b'truma. So this mamzer is related to her. It's misyaches to her. It's her grandchild, and therefore, because of this, she can't go back to her father's house to eat truma. The final halacha the Mishnah says, Kohen Gadol. There could be a case of a Kohen Gadol, pa'amim shehu paisel, and sometimes this Kohen Gadol will be a cause to passel his grandmother of eating truma. How could that be? Keitzad, what's the case here? Bas Kayin li Yisrael. A Bas Kayin got married to Yisrael. V'yolda menu bas. And she gave birth to a daughter. V'holcha bas v'nisis l'kayin. And now this daughter went and got married to a Kayin. V'yolda menu ben. And gave birth to a child, a son, which is a kosher Kayin. Harezeh roi liyos Kayin Gadol. So this grandson here is fit to be a Kohen Gadol, oimid u'mishamesh al gabi ha-mizbeach, to stand and serve by the mizbeach. So now what happens? Michael es imay. So because he's born here, so therefore his mother that's married to a Kohen, even if the Kohen dies, but the son is the cause for his mother to be able to eat trumah. But at the same time, upaisel eimimai, the grandmother, which was a Bas Yisrael, married to, the grandmother was a Bas Kayin, that is, married to a Yisrael. And now that Yisrael dies, and she wants to go back to her father's house to eat trumah, but because she has a descendant from this marriage to the Yisrael still alive, even though that descendant is a Kohen Gadol, but she has a descendant, so paisel eimimai. So that descendant will passel the grandmother going back to the father's house to eat trumah. So Zay Seimeres, here, this woman, this grandmother here says about her grandson, Loi Kibni Kohen Gadol, it shouldn't be like my son, my grandson that is, this Kohen Gadol, Shu Paislani Min HaTruma, because he's the cause that I become puzzled from going back to eat truma. Okay, going back to one of the first halachas that said in the Mishnah regarding a person that married a shaita, so then it says the marriage doesn't take effect at all, and therefore it will not passel a Bas Kayin from eating truma. It will not be a cause for a Bas Yisrael married to a Kayin to eat truma. Tanin ela the Tana Rabbanon. So now this Mishnah is a raya to what we learned in a Braise. Shaita v'katan shenisu, a shaita or a cotton that get married. Shenosu nashim, that is a shaita cotton that married women umeiso, and any of them passed away. Nishayseim peturis min chalitza min yibum. Their wives are exempt of doing chalitza or yibum because the marriage does not take effect at all. That's the halacha that we see here in our Mishnah, that it didn't take effect, and therefore they don't passel, and they're not causing to be meichel truma either. Then it said in the Mishnah, Keitzad. So the Bachir says, Harei Yisrael Shabal Bas Kayin. So a Yisrael that gets married to a Bas Kayin. So Teichal B'Trumah, or again, it's not married. Baal Bas Kayin means that there was a relation with a Bas Kayin without marriage. So Teichal B'Trumah, so she could still eat Trumah. She can go back to her father's house and eat Trumah. Ibra, but if she became pregnant, then Lo Teichal. Then she cannot eat Trumah. Fragt the Gemara, Kiven de Ibra, loy toichal. Now, if the halacha here is that if she became pregnant, so then she will not be able to go back to Truma. She's not going back to her father's house as she was binureh, as she was before. So if so, leicha shema Ibra. So any time a Baskayan had a relation with a Yisrael, how could we just let her immediately go back to her father's house and eat Truma? Sorry, shouldn't we be concerned that maybe she's pregnant and let her wait for 3 months to see if she's pregnant or not? Mi loitnan. Didn't we learn in the Mishnah before in this Masechta that we're concerned in such a similar kind of a case that maybe this woman is pregnant? So the halach of the Mishnah was mafrishin oisan gimel chadashim. We separate these women for 3 months. The Mishnah they were speaking about 2 women that got exchanged, their husbands, and each one had a relation with the other husband. And now the Mishnah says so they're going to have to wait 3 months before they go back to their right husband. Shema mubariseh. Maybe they are pregnant, and we're not going to be able to determine who's the father of this child. So we see that just because of a relation, it brings about a concern of a pregnancy, and we have to wait 3 months. Here as well, if this Baskayan had a relation with the Yisrael, so we should be concerned that there may be a pregnancy, so she can't go back to her father's house to eat Trumah. So Rabbi Baravona says there's a difference. When it comes to yichus, to know the lineage of who the father is, for that we're very concerned and we're more machmer. However, for her to be able to go back to eat truma, over here we're not as machmer, we're not concerned for this. And here, regarding this halacha, going back to Yitrumah, we don't take into account even something which is a doubt to be concerned about, but there's another case where we do. Vatanya, we learned in Abraisa, so over here it's speaking about a Bas Kayin that married a Yisrael. And her husband tells her, I'm giving you a get that should take effect a moment before I pass away. So asura lechel betrumah miyad. Immediately, she's not going to be allowed to eat trumah because even though now she's married to her husband and she can eat trumah, but the moment he dies, if she had children from him, she will not be able to eat trumah, and therefore we never know. Every moment it could be the moment before he passes away, and therefore she's not allowed to eat trumah now. So we see that we are concerned about a suffix that could be a cause for her not to eat trumah. So too over here, a Baskayan that had a relation with the Yisrael, and could be she's a Mu'uberes already, that should be enough of a concern that she shouldn't be able to go back to eat trumah. Hello, Rabbi Baravona says, no, there's another distinction here. In the case of a marriage, over here, they were concerned that maybe she's mu'uberes, and therefore, they have to wait 3 months. However, regarding a relation that's not with a marriage, just znus, over here, they were not concerned. As Rashi said, we learned earlier in the Masechta, that in the case of znus, a woman does whatever she can not to become pregnant, and we rely on that, and we're not concerned that she's pregnant. And regarding a case of Nesuin, are we chayshish when it comes to Trumah? But v'hatanya Baskayin shenisas liYisrael, a Baskayin that got married with a marriage to a Yid, umeis, and he passed away. Toiveles v'oicheles. Even if she had a relation with him that day, she immediately goes to the mikveh, because at least for that day she's tummy until that night, at least. Maybe although the Rishonim bring up that in other places it says you have to wait 3 days, but here it says she's toivel and veicheles b'truma larav. Immediately that evening she can go ahead and eat truma. So here I see that even regarding a case where there's a nisuin, but nevertheless I'm not chayshish for any sfeikis, and she can go ahead and eat truma right away in the evening, and I don't say that maybe she's pregnant and therefore she cannot go back to her father's house. Rav Chizde says, Toiveles v'yecheles, when it says here she goes to the mikveh and she could immediately go and eat truma, ad arboim. That's only until 40 days. And the Mishnah and the Gemara that is explains why only until 40 days. What's the concern? That she may be a me'uberes and she can't go back to eat truma in that case. Now, the iloi ma'abra, so within those 40 days, if it turns out that she's not pregnant, so then good, halei ma'abra, she's not pregnant, she can go back to eat truma in her father's house. Vi ma'abra, if it turns out she is pregnant, but adar boim, first 40 days of pregnancy, until the 40th day, ma'e balmi, the pregnancy is like water, it's not even considered to be a pregnancy. So she's going back to her father's house without a pregnancy. Later, if the pregnancy develops, then she'll become puzzle to eat truma. So therefore, the first 40 days, she could go back. Amalei Abaye. So Abaye says regarding this pshat, what does it say in the seifa of that braisa? Hukka ubra b'meya, comes the point that you could notice that she's pregnant, so then tehei mekukeles lamafreya. So then this will passel her retroactively that if she ate truma, this truma was not hers. As Rashi here says, she's going to have to pay back the keren, the principle of what she ate, with another chaimish, a fifth, like the halacha of every zar or zara that eats truma. So why would this passel her lemafreya if we're saying that for the first 40 days she can just eat truma because it's not a pregnancy yet? Well, here it says it does go back lemafreya. Says the Gemara, Maimekul Keles, when it says that it goes back lemafreya, Adar Boyim, that's until the 40 days. The first 40 days after this relation, we're not concerned at all. It goes back lemafreya up to that point of the 40 days. Gemara now begins a new subject, a machlokes here between Rav and Shmuel. Hitmer, we learned the machlokes. Haba ala rusase beveis chama. A man that had a relation with his arusa, with his wife, that's after the first stage of marriage, and she's still living by her in-laws, and he goes and he has a forbidden relation with her. Doesn't wait for the full marriage that comes after chuppah and so on. Rav says in such a case, a vlad mamzer. The child will be a mamzer, even if both of them are saying that this child was born from our relation, but nevertheless, as Rashi says, Rav says there's an assumption here that she is a prutza, that she has relations with anyone, even if it's forbidden, and therefore we say that someone else had a relation with her, and this child born is a mamzer. Shmuel says, Havlat shtuki. The child that's born is a shtuki, which means we can't say what he is. It's a suffix if the child is a mamzer or not. Because we don't know. Maybe this is born from this Orus, and in that case the child is not a mamzer. Or maybe it was born from someone else, and she's an Eshes Ish, and the child is a mamzer. Amar Rave, so Rave says about this machlokes here. Mistavre milsa de Rav, it's logical, the opinion of Rav, that the child would be a mamzer, the daime me'alme. If she's being suspected, if there's a rumor, and she's being suspected about having a relation with other people, not only her husband. If there's no rumor at all and no suspicion about her having a relation with someone else, then Basra Didei Shadinanle, we throw this pregnancy or this child born after her Orus that had a relation with her, and we say that that's where the child was born from. We're not concerned about her having a relation with anyone else. Narave says there's a source for why he's saying this. How do I know that if there's no rumor, so then we are sure that it goes after the husband? Tiketani, because we learned in our Mishnah here that Yolda Teichel. So the Mishnah over here said in the case of a Bas Yisrael that had a relation with a Kayin without marriage, an Anusa or a Mafutta. So in such a case, the Mishnah said that if she gave birth from this relation out of marriage, then now she has a son, a Kayin, so she can eat Trumah. So what's this case that she can eat Trumah? Hey Chidami, what are we talking about over here? If there's a rumor, there's a suspicion that she also had a relation with other people, not just with this Kayin. So Yalda, if she has a child, a Kayin, why in his merit could she go and eat Trumah because she has a child, a Kayin? How do we know that it's her child from this relation? Maybe there's a suspicion that she has a relation with other people as well. So we don't know who this child is. The case over here is that there's a rumor, there's a suspicion she had a relation with this man, but there's no rumor about her having a relation with anyone else. And we say that we rely on the fact that the child is born from this relation with this Kayin. So now he says, in that case, the Lahai Yisura, this Kayin she had a relation without marriage was forbidden, or anyone else she would have a relation with is also forbidden. So now that there's only a rumor about this relation between this Kayin and this Bas Yisrael, we say the child born is probably from this relation, and it's a Kayin, and she can eat Truma. So Hacha, over here, this Orus that had a relation with his wife, the Lahai Yisura, if she would have a relation with anyone else, for anyone else it's an Eishes Ish, it's a real Isser. Or Lahai Yetera, relative to that level of an Isser, this is a Heter because she's Orus to him. So Leikol came for sure, we would rely on the fact that if there is no rumor that she had a relation with anyone else, that I can assume that the relation was with him. Amalei Abaye, so Abaye responds to what Rava says, not necessarily is there a raya from our Mishnah. Loila mei malach, really I can tell you, kol heche, the daima, minei, any time that there is a rumor that she had a relation with her Orus, with the one that she was in her marriage with, in the first stage of marriage, avagav du lei daima me alma, even if there is no rumor about her having relations with anyone else, Omar Rav, nevertheless Rav is saying, havlad mamzer, that the child is born, we assume him to be a mamzer. My time, and what's the reason for this? Because we say if she's allowed herself to behave this way with her oros, and she's not allowed to live with him at this point yet, she also is open and she has relations with others as well, and therefore the child is a mamzer. What's the story in the Mishnah? Why in the Mishnah are we so sure this Bas Yisrael that has a relation with a Kayin, that the child born comes from the Kayin? In the Mishnah, the story that happened was they were both imprisoned together, and there is no concern that she had a relation with someone else. They were sure that the child is a Kayin. But otherwise, in a regular case, Rav would be right, that would definitely concern that she's open with a relation to anyone else, and therefore the child would not be a Kayin. There are others that had another version of this machlokes here between Rav and Shmuel. If this Oros had a relation with his wife, the Oros that was living by the in-laws, and they both agree that they had a relation. Kula alma loy pligi. So Rav and Shmuel would not argue about this. The basrei didei shadin lei, that we assume that a child born comes from this relation. And now the machlokes between Rav and Shmuel was taught and learned as follows. Arusa she'ibra, when you have a case of an arusa that becomes pregnant, so na Rav Omar avlad mamzer. So Rav says that the child will be a mamzer. Okay, so in such a case, when they are not, we don't know from where this child was born. So over here, in such a case, Rav says that we go after the Raiv of the world, and therefore, in Raiv of the world, she could have had a relation with anyone else. We don't know what, they're not telling us, they're not admitting and saying that we had a relation with one another. She becomes pregnant all of a sudden. So over here, Rav says we go with Raiv of the world, and therefore, it's possible she had a relation with someone else while she's an Eishes Ish, that's the Raiv, and the child's a Mamzer. Shmuel says, Aflat Shtuki. No, this child will still be a suffix about this. Very possibly the one she had a relation with is the one that she's destined to fully get married to her husband. So therefore there's a suffix here. So now, according to this version, Rav said about this machlokes here, Mistavre Milse de Rav, the reasoning of Rav makes sense to follow in a case, when there is no rumor about her having a relation with her husband, but there is a rumor or a suspicion about her having a relation with other people in the world. So then I say that you go after the Rav and say that she had a relation with someone else. But if there's a suspicion that she had a relation with him, so then even if there's also a rumor and a suspicion that she had a relation with someone else, we still say that it's more logical that she probably had a relation with her husband that she's already partially married to. Rav said, according to this version, again, he brings our Mishnah to prove his point. From where do I see this? Because our Mishnah said, Yolda, if this Bas Yisrael had a relation with this Kayin out of marriage, with no marriage at all, and then she had a child, a Kayin. So we say, Teichel, once she has a child, a Kayin, she can eat Truma. In other words, we're sure that this child born is a Kayin. Hey Chidami, what's the case here? Why are we so sure that the child is born from this relation and he's a Kayin? If there's only a rumor about her having a relation with this person and there's no suspicion whatsoever about a relation with anyone else, is there any chiddush here in the Mishnah that if she has a son, a Kayin now, that she can eat Truma? It's obvious. So don't you think what's the case of our Mishnah? There's a rumor about her having a relation with this Kayin, but also rumors about her having relations with others. And still we say that we rely on this, that she had a relation with this Kayin, and therefore the child's a Kayin and she can eat Truma. So if over there, the Lahai Yisura, her having a relation with this Kayin without any marriage and having a relation with anyone else is forbidden. We say that it's probably a relation with this Kayin. Over here, in the case of a Oros and her Arus and his Arusa, and she's in her in-law's house, the Lahai Yisura, her having a relation with any others is a Isur of Eishes Ish. And having that relation with this Oros is a heter, relatively speaking, it's not an Eishes Ish. Like Kol Shekem, most definitely we could rely on the fact that the relation was with her Oros, even if there's also a rumor that she had a relation with someone else. So Abaye responds to what Rav said, there's no raya from our Mishnah. Really I can tell you, anytime there's a rumor that she had a relation with anyone else, even though there's also a rumor that she had a relation with her Oros, Rav will still say that the child will be a mamzer because of the rumor that she had a relation with someone else. Umas nisin, what is our Mishnah speaking about? Beloi daim miklal, that there's no rumor whatsoever, not from this kohen that she had a relation with, or not from anyone else. And that was the chiddush of our Mishnah, to say that she can eat truma when the child that was born from this relation here, and we rely on the fact that this child is a kohen. It's a case where there was no rumor whatsoever. That was the case of our Mishnah, so it's not a proof at all to the point that Rava said.